Hi, this is Brett Miller from Custom Software by Preston, and as you can see today, I'm wearing what I like to refer to as my money shirt. You see how it's it looks like a $100 bill, doesn't it? So based on that, I thought I would jump into the topic of iPhone development costs. And I know that's a big curiosity for a lot of the potential clients we talk to, so I'm happy to share my expertise in the hopes of educating and giving you a feel of what you're looking at as you consider embarking on your mobile application development initiative. So I would say generally, there's a bell curve associated with prices, and what I mean by that is most of the prices fall within relatively tight range because in general, people will visualize their app and they'll come to, some type of list of requirements that generally fall within a tight range. Now, the larger range, as I look at it and can consider all the projects we've done and all the projects I've heard about over the years, generally I would say the lower end is 4,000 and the upper end is probably 50,000. That's the full bell as I see it. Now, the tighter range, most of the apps that I hear about and that we work on generally fall, I would say, approximately between 16,000 and say 24,000. And these, they have a good amount of functionality and they do some great stuff. And I'll kind of break down those costs to you so you can understand how we determine pricing and what are the different factors that make that up. And it's really interesting in our market, so many development shops price things completely different, and you've got to understand it's not a commodity. What you get from one software development studio will be totally different than what you get from another, and their pricing could be totally different as well. So, you take the same application and one company will quote it at 10,000 while another would quote it at 60,000. And that has to do with their location, their skill set, their markup, what their portfolio represents, how much demand they have. If they've got a tremendous demand, if they finish high up in the search engine rankings, they could ask for more because they have a lot more opportunity. So just be aware. Sometimes it's not even about your product; it's just about the demand that this particular company has the fortune of having at that particular moment. So let me start to break down some costs here to help give you a feel. Now, there's another topic that's interesting. What are you looking for? Do you want cost effective or do you want something really high quality like a Porsche? And the way you go about development is different in those scenarios, and what aspects of the application you highlight and where you focus, and just the whole general process. If you want something high end, you got to expect to pay more. So let me break down there are different aspects of where I see the work being located. So the first thing we do when we work with a client is we look for them to hand over a full set of requirements, and the more documentation the better, the more specific the better. And this demonstrates that they're a sophisticated client and that they're serious about moving forward potentially with us. And we have to take a look at what they have and see how much work is going to be required to fully grasp and understand and discuss the various nuances that might exist within that application. So our first phase of a project is to do the analysis and thoroughly identify and document what we're building here on a technical basis. We might put together use cases and use stories, technical requirements, things like that. So that's one phase of work as I see it. Then the next phase is design. Now again, this ties in with, are you looking for a Porsche or are you looking for something cost effective? And how specific are you in reaching your vision as far as, are you going to require the developers to create more and more versions and very minute modifications to try to reach the state of perfection? Well, each one of those renditions is going to end up costing additional money. So you have to know how specific you are is going to drive some of the costs related to creating different versions and better UI and design aspects. Generally, we like to lock down at two versions of modifying UI. Beyond that, we start talking about additional costs associated beyond what we might actually quote for a project, just because we don't know how specific a potential client is going to be. Now, the next subject as we see it is the actual data. And where is the data coming from? Is it shared or is it standalone? Now, if it's standalone and it's only going to exist on that particular device, it's relatively easy to work with. But if we have a scenario where we're pulling this data dynamically from the internet, or there's some type of back-end administration panel that we have to develop to allow an administrator to go and modify drop-down values and different potential routes through the system. You can figure in those types of scenarios where there's an API we have to call, or where there's an administration panel, that could end up costing 20, 30, 40% more than what the standalone standalone application might cost. So there's that aspect. Then you start to get into the monetization model. How are you earning money by building this application? If you're looking for in-app purchases, if you're looking for a subscription-based application, building those components, something like that might cost a couple grand in itself just to build those properly, dependent on what they're getting when they do unlock the in-app purchase, or when they do upgrade to a different version, or whatever it is. So there's some additional work that might be there. We generally talked about so far, an iOS app, but is that an iPhone or is that iPad? So those are different form factors. And an iPad, you'd want to ideally redesign your screen to better utilize the screen space that you have available. So if you're looking for your application to run properly in both environments, you probably need to prepare to spend another 40% more to make sure it's optimized for those additional devices. And then there's also the question of legacy devices, which are iPhone 4, 4G and prior. Or is it 4S? I don't know, one of those two. But anyways, the devices prior to the iPhone 5 had a different screen resolution and different measurements. So we would have to create a custom version for that. So that's another interesting question that needs to be addressed. Those are some of the aspects. To get into a few more, if you're looking for sharing with Facebook or Twitter or any of those social services, that in and of itself might be between say $500 and $1,500, depending on specifically how this is working and what the capabilities are. And then just generally, I think you could take a look and consider the number of screens you have to help, correlate with price. So I would say on a simple application, more on the lower end of that cost spectrum that I presented, if you have 3 or 4, screens and they're not tying in with any data dynamically, that's going to be on the simple side, maybe 4, 5, 6,000. Once you start talking about, 10, 15, 20 screens, that do some complicated stuff and need to be administered, and they tie into various services on the internet to pull data dynamically, and their shared information, then you start bumping up the price for sure into the higher ranges that we've talked about. But it's really difficult here for me to sit and say, well, this is exactly how much your application is going to cost, given that we've never actually spoken. And then the only other aspect I can think of off the top of my head that affects price would be, how much are you utilizing things like GPS and maps? Are you utilizing the camera, the phone book? What, the gyrometer? Each one of those things might be 1,000 or 2,000 more to build the functionality that you need related to that specific capability. So it's certainly a complicated topic, and there are so many aspects that add into it. And and also, like we talked about, you have to look at, that specific development studio and what their capability is and availability and desire to get involved in your project at the current time. And this is only to start talking about, the business or productivity style apps. I mean, when we start getting into games, 3D games, and, games that are very playable and have action, and all these different aspects, the pricing, and we personally don't actually build those types of apps, but those can be $100,000 or $200,000, $300,000 easily. And I think a lot of people have a tendency to underestimate the cost and the effort involved in something that complicated. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my thoughts on how you determine pricing. One of the aspects as an organization that we really push to help clients be as cost effective as possible is around this minimal viable product. What are the specific features that your users must have in order to do the specific tasks they're specifically designed for? And You want to be careful about that because you don't want to remove something that users are going to rank your application poorly because it's missing, but on the other hand, you don't want to build something, some functionality they're not even going to use. So, that's just something that we work with our clientele on and try to to guide them in the most effective decision making possible. But I would be happy to speak with you directly and talk about your project and see how we might be able to assist you. I think I could probably give you a better quote if I could actually hear you, because so far you've been very quiet throughout this whole discussion, I would say. But happy to help you. Feel free to reach out. My name is Brett Miller, Custom Software by Preston, and we'd be very interested in hearing more about your project and giving you a specific quote. But good luck on putting together all the requirements and building it if you decide to to move forward. Thank you very much, and I'll look forward to hearing from you. Bye-bye.